I've always wanted to visit and explore Washington State and had seen a short article in a magazine about the world-famous Cascades Loop through the gorgeous mountainous scenery. Although it could be driven in a single day, we spent 8 days in total for the drive, covering just over 1,000 miles in that time. This video started life as a longer article on my website. That article has many more practical tips, and if you are seriously planning this trip, it is well worth reviewing. If you just want to enjoy the gorgeous scenery, you are in the right place. The plan for day 2 was to visit Whidbey Island. Having flown from the east, we were 2 hours behind the local time, and so we were up really early and caught the 6:30 a.m. ferry from Mukilteo for the 20-minute sail to the island. We tried to cover many of the most attractive parts of the island on this first day, and so the first stop just after 7 a.m. was Double Bluff Beach in Useless Bay, and were amazed by the masses of logs and tree trunks washed up on the beach in the winter storms. In the summer, the locals build various structures from them along the beach, which is also a leash-free dog park. In the winter, they are destroyed each year in the storms that roll through the region. By now, our early morning start was being felt in our empty stomachs, and so we drove to the lovely town of Langley. We decided to stroll along the seafront, walking past this interesting statue of a small boy wistfully looking out to sea, and then have breakfast in the very well-reviewed Braeburn restaurant. So popular that we had to get in the line outside the eatery in time for the 9 a.m. opening. In case I forgot to mention it, the breakfast was fantastic. Salmon eggs Benedict for me. Then we were off again to Fort Casey, a 19th century defensive fortification built to deter invasion from the sea, with an interesting Admiralty lighthouse which I think you can normally visit. It was closed when we were there. You do need a pass for most of these locations. We bought the annual pass to the Washington State Parks for $30 in the machines at this park, and it turned out to be a great investment. Next on our list was Coupeville, with its wharf and pier. The town has a range of interesting craft shops and galleries, and a great ice cream store. Even mid-morning, this was a lovely treat. It also has a fascinating little museum filled with artifacts from both the Native American peoples who lived in this area, as well as more recent developments as the settlers arrived. The next highlight was certainly impressive. Deception Pass State Park, with its historic bridge over the rapidly flowing tidal passage separating this island from Fidalgo Island. The park itself is quite extensive, and we strolled first to the beach below the bridge and watched various boats making their way through the rapids in this narrow inlet, and then I took the steeper path that leads up the hill to the bridge itself to get some more commanding views from the walkway. The structure underneath was certainly impressive as well for a bridge built in the 1930s. The next morning we set out for Anacortes, right at the tip of Fidalgo Island, for a whale-watching cruise. Boarding the large catamaran, we found plenty of space to move around, inside, on the decks, or out at the stern. As we cruised through the San Juan Islands, the captain narrated our route and kept a sharp eye out for whales. Before long, we spotted a pod of orcas gliding gracefully through the water. For nearly 40 minutes, we watched them surface, dive, and reappear, the captain skillfully positioning the boat so everyone had a clear view. It was a magical experience, quiet, powerful, and unforgettable. We then sailed around some of the small, interesting islands looking for other wildlife. Seals seemed to be very comfortable in these waters, and this one was more curious than most. I think it is trying to say something. Perhaps, "Mum, this is too deep." All the time, there are views in all directions. I was particularly impressed with the view of Mount Baker, still with snow on its flanks, over the many receding ridgelines of the mountains. Afterwards, we drove the scenic loop through Washington Park, where forested roads opened occasionally to sweeping views of the islands. Finally, the road opened up at a large granite outcropping, offering a magnificent view of the ocean and the town of Anacortes in the distance. And there was more with the drive to Mount Erie, where the road climbs to a summit with panoramic views stretching far across the water to Whidbey Island to the south. Later that afternoon, we stopped in Lake Connor, a riverside town with its distinctive rainbow bridge. It was pleasant enough for coffee and dessert by the water, though not as charming as some of the island towns. As the day drew to a close, we found ourselves along the Everett waterfront. The tide was calm, the air still, and the last light of the sun stretched across the bay. Out in the water, rows of weathered wooden pilings stood like silent sentinels, remnants of Everett's mill town past, when this shoreline was alive with lumberyards, docks, and the hum of industry. Now they've been claimed by time and tide, softened into sculpture by the sea. Standing there, camera in hand, I felt the scene capture itself, the stillness, the colour, the sense of stories lingering in the air. Everett may be a city of industry, but at sunset it becomes something else entirely, peaceful, reflective, and unforgettable. By the time we reached Leavenworth, we were ready for a soft bed at the Pension Anna, a Bavarian-style inn complete with carved wooden furniture and hearty German breakfasts. That evening we dined on steak and local beer at the Mozart restaurant, then fell into bed exhausted but happy. Leavenworth is like stepping into a storybook, an alpine village recreated in the 1960s to revive a fading logging town. With its German signs, painted facades, and mountain backdrop, it's both quirky and charming. I rose at sunrise to photograph the Wenatchee River, the morning light painting the peaks above the Bavarian-style hotels. Later, we explored Lake Wenatchee and the smaller hidden lake, strolled through town, and admired a photographer's gallery of super-large landscape prints. That evening I planned a trip to nearby Lake Wenatchee, but relied on my memory of when sunset would be. I was racing to set up my tripod just as the sky lit up in brilliant color. The reflection of the mountains in the still water was worth every frantic step. The next morning we had to pack to depart, but there was still time for a drive along Icicle Creek. Right at the end, the road was closed, but I did spot these fantastic stacked pebbles and clambered close to capture some intriguing images against the roaring river. From Leavenworth, we drove to Lake Chelan, stopping first in the city of Wenatchee to explore the Pybus Market and cool off with ice cream at the historic Owl Soda Fountain. That evening the clouds broke just enough for a glowing sunset over the lake, but unfortunately the weather forecast for the next day was not great, and so instead of the long ferry to Stehekin, we opted for a slower pace. We drove as far as the road would take us along the lake, then enjoyed a leisurely lunch at Chelan Vineyards, overlooking the vines and the water. Later, we wandered the Chelan wildlife area, spotting hawks and enjoying the quiet trails. Heading north the following morning, we stopped in Pateros for views of the Columbia River, then followed the Methau Valley toward Winthrop. The valley was peaceful, dotted with small towns and rolling hills. In Twisp, we paused for lunch at the Cinnamon Twist Bakery, then continued on to Winthrop, a town straight out of the Old West, with wooden storefronts and boardwalks housing shops and many, many restaurants. Even the gas station here looks trapped in the past, but the lady in the deli was more than happy to use our gluten-free bread to create some delicious sandwiches for the journey. We did take the opportunity to drive out of town to the Falls Creek Falls, which are very close to the road along a simple trail. Then a drive up to Sun Mountain Lodge to get a high-level view of the mountains we were due to cross the next day. We stayed in a riverside cabin with its own hot tub, explored the Schaefer Historical Museum's collection of pioneer buildings and artifacts, and ended the day with dinner and local beer at the old schoolhouse brewery. We set out early for the North Cascades, the road nearly empty as we climbed toward Washington Pass. The overlook itself was closed for resurfacing, but the drive was spectacular. Towering cliffs, deep valleys, and endless ridges. We hiked the short trail to Rainy Lake, where the still water mirrored the mountains perfectly. This trail is a perfect start to the park, smooth, flat, and well-maintained. Further along, Ross Lake appeared in a sweeping panorama, followed by the turquoise brilliance of Diablo Lake. The overlook there was busy, but there are many different views of the lake, so that you never felt overwhelmed by tourists. Diablo Lake has been captured in photos many times, but this telephoto view of some paddleboarders in the turquoise water caught my eye. After lunch on the beach, I hiked the Thunder Knob Trail for a higher view, switchback after switchback, until the lake spread out below me like a jewel. It was one of the highlights of the entire trip, and proved that these old legs of mine still have some energy in them. That evening we stayed in Marble Mount, a tiny town at the park's edge, where the North Cascades Inn provided a quirky but comfortable stop for the night. Our room was perhaps known as the Sasquatch Room, decorated with a massive mural of Bigfoot to watch over us as we slept. An old bridge opposite gave some great views up the Skagit River towards the North Cascades National Park. On our final morning, we drove south along Highway 530, clouds hanging low over the peaks. Just for a moment the sky cleared and Glacier Peak revealed itself above the valley, a fleeting glimpse but a fitting farewell. The Cascade Loop had given us everything we hoped for: mountains, lakes, wildlife, and small towns full of character. More than 1,000 miles of discovery and memories that will last far longer than the drive itself.